Good afternoon, everybody. While the ministers are getting settled, I'll just read some things I have to read to you, so just bear with me. Before we begin, we have a few important preventative measures to share to prevent disruptive and potentially harmful audio feedback incidents that can cause injuries. We remind all in-person participants to keep their earpieces away from the microphones at all times. When you are not using your earpiece, please place it face down on the middle of the sticker for this purpose that you will find on the table. These measures are in place so we can protect the health and safety of all participants, including interpreters, and conduct our business without interruption. Thank you all for being here. I'm JP Tasker from CBC News. We have Minister Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, to give us an update on the government's economic plan. She's also joined by the Minister of Public Services and Procurement and Quebec Lieutenant Jean-Yves Duclos and the Minister of Small Business, Rechie Valdez. Over to you, Ministers. Thanks for being here.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Good to see you. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the Canadian economy, our tax break, our rebate for Canadian workers, and an update on the carbon rebate for small businesses. Then Jean-Yves will talk about the tax break, the workers' rebate, with particular attention to what it means for Quebec. And then Rechie Minister Valdez will provide more detail on the carbon rebate for small businesses. Commençons avec l'économie canadienne. En octobre, l'inflation était à 2%. L'inflation est située dans la fourchette cible depuis 10 mois. Ça veut dire toute l'année. C'est très important pour les Canadiens et Canadiennes. Ça veut dire des prix plus stables. Et avec la diminution de l'inflation, les taux d'intérêt diminuent aussi. Le Canada a été le premier pays du G7 à avoir réduit ses taux d'intérêt 4 fois. C'est une bonne nouvelle, surtout pour les Canadiens avec une hypothèque, et c'est bon pour les propriétaires et les entreprises. The Prime Minister on Thursday announced a tax break for all Canadians and the Working Canadians rebate. We've tabled draft legislation in Parliament to make that happen. The tax break means a GST exemption from December 14th to February 15th on essential items like prepared foods, like restaurant meals, like snacks, like clothing for kids and diapers, and toys. We know that we can't set prices at the checkout counter, but we can give Canadians a break and help them afford the things they need and save for the things that they want. Inflation is down, rates are coming down, but it's still hard for Canadians. And that's why now is the time to give Canadians a little bit of help. We also announced, the Prime Minister announced, the Working Canadians rebate. That will be a check for $250 paid in the spring. It will be paid out to Canadians who worked in 2023 and earned up to $150,000. It will help 18.7 million Canadians, and this is about helping middle-class Canadians, helping them with a little bit more money in their bank accounts to pay their bills and make other essential purchases. We're here really to urge all parliamentarians to join us, to join our MPs and our government in getting this legislation passed quickly so that Canadians can get the break that they need. And some more extremely good news. We have talked about the fact that this year we're going to pay the Canada Carbon Rebate for small businesses. These are going to be significant sums of money. A business with 10 employees in Ontario, for example, will be getting $4,000. A business with 499 employees in Alberta will be getting $294,000. So these are going to be significant payments to small businesses across the country. And we're here to announce that Canadian small businesses will be getting those payments ahead of schedule. The first wave of payments has been processed. direct deposits should start showing up in businesses' bank accounts today, and they should arrive between today and December 3rd. Small businesses should check their My CRA account to see where their rebate is in terms of being processed. And I'd like to remind you what we said we would do is deliver those direct deposits on December 15th, but we know how urgent it is for small businesses to get that help. And I am really glad that we're able to announce today that small businesses today will be starting to get their rebate. And Minister Valdez will have more to say about that. Now I turn it over to Jean-Yves. À vous la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Chrystia, et bonjour tout le monde. Comme on le sait, la situation économique du Canada va de mieux en mieux depuis la période post-pandémique d'inflation importante que nous avons vécue. L'économie canadienne connaîtra la plus forte croissance des pays du G7 en 2025. Le taux de chômage est faible, le taux d'inflation est stable et sous contrôle, et les taux d'intérêt sont à la baisse. Mais même si les choses vont mieux, et de mieux en mieux, certainement quand on se compare avec d'autres économies et avec la situation post-pandémique, les familles canadiennes, elles, tardent à ressentir dans leur portefeuille cette amélioration. La pression est particulièrement importante à l'approche des fêtes et dans les semaines qui suivent. La semaine dernière, le premier ministre a donc annoncé que dès le 14 décembre prochain, les Québécois et les autres Canadiens pourront profiter d'un congé de TPS sur une multitude de produits de première nécessité, oui, mais pas seulement ces produits. On s'assure ainsi de couper les impôts, les taxes sur des produits comme les vêtements d'enfants, certains jouets pour enfants, les Legos et certains produits alimentaires qui étaient auparavant ou qui seraient autrement taxés. Parce que tous les Canadiens méritent de passer un bon temps des fêtes en famille et d'avoir un peu de répit parmi les mois froids de l'hiver. Cela permettra aussi d'aider les PME qui voient souvent leur chiffre d'affaires diminuer en début d'année, en janvier et en février. Cet hiver, on donne donc un peu de répit pour s'assurer que tout le monde puisse en profiter. Ce printemps, nous offrirons également une aide directe de 250 $ aux travailleurs canadiens et québécois. Cette aide ponctuelle aidera les familles de la classe moyenne à payer les factures et l'épicerie. La remise pour les travailleurs canadiens s'applique à tous les travailleurs qui ont déclaré des revenus de moins de 150 000 $ en 2023. Cette aide sera offerte à approximativement 19 millions de travailleurs canadiens, incluant ceux de la classe moyenne plus aisée, qui ressentent également la pression de l'inflation élevée des dernières années sur leur compte de banque. Ces deux mesures ponctuelles, le congé de taxes et la remise pour les travailleurs canadiens, s'ajoutent à plusieurs mesures structurantes que le gouvernement canadien a mises en place depuis 2015. L'allocation canadienne pour enfants, qui donne plus d'argent à 9 familles sur 10 et qui réduit la pauvreté des enfants de 40 %. Le régime canadien des soins dentaires, avec près de 3 millions de Canadiens déjà inscrits, dont près de 1 million au Québec seulement. The Canada Carbon Rebate, which is putting more money in the pockets of 8 families out of 10. Our national child care program, which is delivering $10 a day child care across the country and providing more child care spaces in Quebec. Those measures are an important relief for Canadian families and workers. However, they also have been repeatedly opposed by Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives. They are now facing a clear choice. Are they going to play the Grinch ahead of Christmas, or are they going to support us to provide a relief to Canadians? Are they going to pursue their crusade against the Canada Carbon Rebate, which is putting more money in the pockets of 8 families out of 10, or supporting our tax rate for all Canadians? Vont-ils continuer de tenter d'annuler la construction des logements abordables que l'on construit présentement au Québec, incluant dans les circonscriptions de députés conservateurs, ou aider les Québécois à payer leur hypothèque? Pour en finir, par conséquent, nous invitons tous les partis à la Chambre à appuyer notre congé de taxes pour les Canadiens et les Québécois. Ceci étant dit, I'm now turning over to Minister Valdez.
Thank you so much. Again, as you've heard from both my colleagues here, today is a big day for Canadian small businesses, and I couldn't be more excited to share good news for small business owners and entrepreneurs right across the country. Small businesses, as you all know, are the heart of our communities and the backbone of our economy. They create jobs, fuel innovation, and make our neighborhoods vibrant places to live. Last month, we announced the details of the tax-free Canada Carbon Rebate for small businesses, which is a game changer for over 600,000 small and medium-sized businesses across the country. And today, I'm thrilled to reinforce what you've already heard today, that the first payments for the Canada Carbon Rebate for small businesses are being deposited directly into bank accounts starting today, 3 weeks ahead of schedule. This is real money right now for small businesses to lower costs and boost their bottom line. Let's talk about numbers. Here's some real scenarios. A small business in Winnipeg with 10 employees will receive $4,810 directly into their accounts. A small business in Mississauga with 50 employees will receive $20,050 in rebates. A medium-sized business in Calgary with 200 employees will receive $118,200 in these rebates to help them reinvest and grow. So if you filed your taxes by July 15th, your rebate is already on its way. And for eligible businesses, rebates will be landing soon into your bank accounts. If you actually missed the tax filing deadline, don't worry, we've got your backs. We're extending that filing deadline to December 31st so that more businesses can benefit from this support. And last month, you already heard me say this a few times, we've delivered another big win for small businesses, lowering Visa and MasterCard interchange fees by up to 27%. I've already heard incredible stories, like a small business where I made the announcement in Mississauga, Honey Soul Food. Unfortunately, with fees being so high, they haven't been able to accept credit cards because of those high fees. But now, thanks to this reduction, they're accepting credit cards again. In other words, this will bring more business back into their company, and that's money that's back into the pockets of entrepreneurs to reinvest in their dreams. Our government has lowered taxes for small businesses. We have further reduced fees. We are delivering rebates so that small businesses can actually do their best in running their business, building community, and fueling our economy. Merci pour votre travail acharné, votre persévérance et votre passion. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, thanks, Minister. We'll now we'll turn to the question and answer portion of our event, and we'll start with Bill Curry with the Globe and Mail, please. One question and one follow-up.
Good afternoon. For Minister Freeland, so in response to the announcement last week, we saw the premiers of PEI in New Brunswick say they were very caught off guard by this, and it's going to impact their own provincial finances because because they're HST, they collect less provincial sales tax. It's not clear whether this change triggers this 1% rule, which requires automatic compensation. And Yves Giroux, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, said if that is in fact triggered, it's going to be a lot more expensive than you had said it was. So what's your response to this? Is the 1% triggered? Are you going to compensate HST provinces?
Thanks for the question. Our focus is very much on working collaboratively with provinces and territories across the country, and Jean-Yves and Dominic LeBlanc and I have been having a lot of conversations with premiers across the country. We think this is a really good measure for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. We think this is relief which will help Canadians, whichever province or territory they live in, and will also provide a boost to small businesses. Our hope is that as we talk more with premiers of provinces and territories, they will recognize that this is a good thing for the people who live in their province, and that they will join us in offering this relief to their people. And we've already seen Newfoundland and Labrador step up and do exactly that. So those are the conversations we're having. I really think that this is a measure that meets the needs of Canadians right now, that will help Canadians, that will help Canadian families, that will help our main streets across the country. And those are the discussions that we've been having. Jean-Yves, est-ce que vous voulez ajouter quelque chose?
I would just add that this, as the Minister of Finance said really well, this is a measure that has a value which is larger than the sum of the two taxes. Canadians, including those living in my province, know that there are two sales taxes in place in most provinces and territories, and I think most of them expect that their provinces and territories, as Chrystia said, will step up to the initiative.
Okay, thanks. I didn't hear a clear answer on compensation. It sounds like no, but anyway. On the legislation and getting this through Parliament, the NDP seemed supportive of last week's announcement. You mentioned draft legislation. Are you going to present this as draft legislation just for these measures from last week, or are you going to package it with what you might have in the fall update, in which case it might be more problematic for other parties?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And as you know, we're a minority in Parliament. To pass any legislation, we need support from MPs from other parties. That's why we tabled draft legislation on Friday, so that MPs from other parties would have a chance to see what we are proposing. And we are having energetic conversations with other parties about these measures. And really, the point that we're making is this is the right thing for Canadians right now. It's the right thing for the Canadian economy right now. And we would love to see all MPs supporting these measures.
All right, thank you. Najoud El-Malise, Canadian Press, please.
Hi, Minister Freeland. So following up on Bill's question, I'm wondering how you see this measure on GST being fair, given that you'll be on the hook to compensate provinces with an HST, but in other provinces that have their own separate sales tax, Canadians will only get a 5% break instead of 15% elsewhere.
So thanks for the question, Najoud. And with real respect, I disagree with the premise. This is an opportunity for all premiers across the country to step up and to join the federal government in providing this relief for their citizens. We've been having conversations with premiers across the country, and we very much hope that that will be the attitude that they take. And I think, I've been talking to our MPs from across the country, and certainly what our MPs are hearing from their constituents is that they really welcome this. Their constituents were happy to hear this announcement. And I think that Canadians across the country would benefit from getting this support, no matter where they live. Notre approche est maintenant et de travailler avec les premiers ministres de toutes les provinces, partout au pays. Nous pensons que ces mesures vont vraiment aider les Canadiens et Canadiens partout au pays. Et nous espérons que les leaders de toutes les provinces seront d'accord avec nous et que les leaders de toutes les provinces vont être d'accord avec nous et vont se joindre à ces mesures du côté du gouvernement fédéral. Et la raison pour laquelle je dis cela, c'est que Nouad a raison, que je pense que les Canadiens dans toutes les provinces ont le même besoin de cet appui, de cette aide, et on espère que les premiers ministres des provinces seront en bout de ligne d'accord avec nous.
Minister Duclos, you're the economist on this panel, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of criticism from economists to the GST measure and the checks, arguing that it's bad economic policy, it's not targeted, not a good use of the government's fiscal power. What's your response to the criticism from economists giving an economic argument in favor of these measures?
I would say that we need to distinguish between structural and temporary measures. This is a temporary measure which acknowledges that despite all of the wonderful economic news that my colleagues economists are correct to spread, no, the average Canadian doesn't yet feel that good news. So yes, falling interest rates, yes, low inflation, yes, rising job numbers. This is all very true, and it will become even more tangible and real in 2025 when economic growth is even more superior, and we, according to the IMF, have the fastest growing economy of all G7 countries. But as of now, when we speak to Canadians, and to Quebecers in particular, they don't feel that yet. So this is a temporary, limited measure that is going to support Canadians at a period of the year in which the pressures on pockets and family finances, those pressures are very hard and very, very strong. Now, I mentioned earlier, there are structural measures that we have put into place and will keep putting into place. And these structural measures, yes, are more targeted and by definition permanent. And for instance, the Canadian Dental Care Plan is a more targeted measure with family income lower than $90,000. It's there to stay, and it's therefore defined in a manner which is a bit more adapted to a long-term measure than the short-term measure that we need to put into place for Christmas time. And never mind the Canada Child Benefit and the important investments in housing, the school food program. All of these measures come with long-term structural impacts on the economy and on personal finances. These measures are limited and very temporary.
And I'm going to add one thing. Oh, en français, allez-y. Je vais ajouter
En
une
français,
idée
bon.
après.
Ben, la réponse est simple. Il faut distinguer entre des mesures permanentes et des mesures temporaires. Les mesures qu'on a annoncées la semaine dernière sont des mesures temporaires. Le congé de taxe, c'est sur 2 mois. Et ensuite, c'est terminé. C'est ciblé sur certains types de consommation. Ça se fait parce que, comme je le disais en anglais, l'économie va mieux, l'économie va de mieux en mieux, et l'économie va aller encore mieux en 2025. Taux d'intérêt à la baisse, l'inflation qui a chuté beaucoup, qui est maintenant depuis le début 2024 dans la cible de la Banque du Canada, l'emploi qui augmente rapidement, la confiance des entrepreneurs et des consommateurs qui augmente significativement. Tout ça, ce sont d'excellentes nouvelles. Mais quand on parle aux gens dans la rue, ils ne ressentent pas encore ces mesures. Donc, pour se rendre en 2025, pour se rendre là où ça va être encore plus tangible en matière de bonnes nouvelles économiques, on met ça en place parce que la période de Noël, c'est une période difficile. Ça vient avec toutes sortes de belles rencontres et de festivités, mais c'est dur pour le portefeuille des gens. Et c'est pour ça qu'on met ça en place pour 2 mois, du 14 décembre au 15 février.
I'd just like to add, Jean-Yves spoke about the disconnect between the positive news that the numbers are showing about the Canadian economy and what people are feeling. He talked about how Canadians are feeling. And that's a really important economic point. A lot of economists have been talking about the vibe session and the fact that Canadians just aren't feeling good and that is having real economic consequences. And the Canadian economists making that point are right, that there is a disconnect between the really positive economic news, the fact that the Canadian economy does appear set for a soft landing. That's good news. But Canadians aren't feeling it, and that is shaping their economic behavior in ways that are not great for the Canadian economy. People have been talking about a vibe session and how that is a challenge for the Canadian economy. One of the positive impacts of this measure is to help Canadians get past that vibe session, because how Canadians feel really does have a real economic impact. And I'd like to mention 2 numbers. After the Prime Minister's announcement on Thursday, BMO upgraded their economic forecast for the Canadian economy for the first quarter from 1.7 to 2.5. And on Friday, the Toronto Stock Exchange hit an all-time high. The Toronto Stock Exchange now has a higher market cap than the FTSE, than the Paris Bourse, or than the German DAX. So there are some good underlying economic developments, economic indicators. It's really important for Canadians to start feeling that confidence and to act on that confidence.
And I just wanted to add 2 points from the perspective of small business. As an entrepreneur myself, we heavily rely on the Christmas holiday season for sales for the year. But one of the challenges is right after the holiday season is over, there's this lull, and it feels like a crash come January. These supports are really going to help small business drive foot traffic into their doors that they never had right after the holiday season. And that's significantly going to help. And I just want to state facts with the Restaurants Canada. They indicated that this GST tax break could mean up to 5% of a boost in sales. That's a $1 billion additional revenue that restaurants can receive as a result of these changes. So that's positive for small businesses and, of course, for our economy.
Mackenzie Gray, Global.
Hi, Minister Freeland. Just to go off what Mr. Duclos just said, one of the rationale the minister just gave, a number of economists are quite upset with this policy. Part of the rationale, it seems, is that it's very temporary. It's going to be for a short period of time. So does that mean past February 15th, your government has no plans to extend any of these programs you're announcing today?
That's right.
On the Vibe session idea that you were just talking about, is a part of the rationale for why you're sending 19 million people checks to improve their vibes economically so they're feeling better about themselves and about the economy? Is that part of the rationale you're saying why you're sending all this money out?
I was specifically referring to the fact that the Canadian economy right now, over the holiday period, is in a place where demand is weak, consumer demand is weak, and there's excess supply and excess capacity. And so one of the benefits of this measure is to give Canadians a little more support, a little more help, and to, with that added confidence, to support our small businesses and to support demand in this very specific period. So that's what I was specifically referring to.
So the checks have nothing. It was just there's a disconnect there between kind of what you're saying.
I was referring to the specific impact on consumer demand of the GST rebate. And that's why I referred to the BMO upgrading of their forecast for Q1, which was very much about what they see happening over the holiday period and having some consumer demand, as Rechie was saying, carry through into January. We heard already from Restaurants Canada that they see this as having a meaningful impact on people's willingness to go out over the holiday period. That's a good thing.
Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News.
Thanks very much. Hi, Minister Freeland. Your defense counterpart this morning, speaking at a conference, suggested that Canada is ready to move up the reaching 2% of GDP timeline to meet NATO requirements. I'm wondering if you can tell us what is a possible new timeline, and is this because you are worried about the pressure from the incoming U.S. administration?
The Prime Minister made a very clear commitment that Canada will reach 2% by 2032. That is a clear, important commitment, and it is a major increase in defense spending from 0.9%, where defense spending was when we formed government and took over from the Conservatives. That is a really, really big step up. I think what we have to focus on as a country is, as we move towards higher defense spending, being sure that that higher defense spending works to support our economy. Other countries that spend at 2% on defense have well-developed military industrial strategies. They work hard to ensure that their defense spending is complementary to economic policy. That's not something that Canada has a lot of recent experience with. We did during the Second World War, but not recently. And as we step up our defense spending, we have to be sure that, yes, it is about supporting our military in these times of real global challenge, that it is about being a good ally to our allies around the world, but also that our defense spending is married to our economic policy in a way that countries that have high defense spending already accomplish. So that's work that we are doing now, and that's something that Canada needs to get serious about.
Okay, and
If you've done that already, perhaps I would point to this morning's announcement on the strategic partnership with L3 Harris, which is an example of something that is going to enhance the capability of Canada to support defense needs across Canada. In the case of the L3 Harris announcement this morning, it's about sustaining the new F-35 that we'll be acquiring over the years to come, and possibly to have a regional depot for the maintenance of these aircrafts, which would be of great significance and great value to our American partners.
And I'm actually going to add one more thing, because Jean-Yves and I talk about this particular issue a lot. So let me just add the Icebreaker Pact between Canada, the United States, and Finland is another good example of the new way that Canada needs to be thinking and working and collaborating with our allies. We believe as a government, and I think this is actually a view that is broadly held in Canada, that now is a time that we need to step up our presence in the Arctic. We are seeing an extremely aggressive Russia. We're seeing a China that is wanting to position itself also as an Arctic power. We are an Arctic nation. We do need to step up our presence there. The Icebreaker Pact is a really good example of one way to do that, collaborating with our allies, supporting our industry. And it's, we've been having some conversations with people who are close to the incoming Trump administration. And one thing that people have pointed out to me is that Icebreaker Pact, that idea of working together to build icebreakers, we actually started working on with the U.S. during the first Trump administration.
Okay, thanks for that. And I'm not quite sure I heard an answer to what Bill Blair meant when he said accelerated timeline, but I got to move on. So today the Prime Minister told NATO parliamentarians they can't let fears and anxieties about affordability get in the way of meeting these spending requirements for NATO. But wasn't Canada doing exactly that when you announced billions in GST relief just last week at a time when you are under fire from allies like the US to meet your spending requirements faster for NATO?
I would say the opposite, actually. The way for us to be a good partner to our NATO allies, the way for us to sustain our support for Ukraine, which has recently recently gone past 1,000 days of fighting for its independence, of fighting for its democracy. The way we sustain that support is that we ensure that Canadians here in Canada are feeling supported, are feeling they have access to opportunity, are feeling they can afford the things they need, and they can save for the things they want. Countries whose citizens, whose people feel economically secure, feel economically supported by their own governments, those are countries that can muster the political capacity to be strong players in the world. So, in my view, being sure that we meet the moment, we support Canadians with their affordability challenge is absolutely connected to, in a really positive way, Canada being able to stand tall and strong and proud and be a force for democracy, for security in the world.
Brian Platt, Bloomberg.
Hi, Minister Freeland. The announcements you made last week are pretty expensive. They're more than $6 billion in impact. Can you confirm, are you still on track to hit all parts of that the fiscal anchors that you laid out in last year's fall economic statement?
Thanks for the question, Brian. Here's what I can say about fiscal sustainability. I'm going to start with the really important point that Jean-Yves made. These measures are temporary and targeted. They are not structural measures. That is entirely intentional. Second, the PBO published a really detailed report over the summer pointing to the fact that Canada's public finances were fiscally sustainable over the long term. And in fact, that PBO report suggested they were sustainable by a long shot. That is true. It is good news. It is actually hard fought because, as you know, when COVID hit, we suffered the deepest recession since the Great Depression. We put in place extraordinary measures to support Canadians and to support Canadian businesses during that recession. Those measures worked. They got us through. We now are achieving a soft landing. But those measures were really expensive, and it was hard to turn those support measures off and to come back down to a sustainable fiscal position. We did that. And as you know, Canada had the fastest rate of fiscal consolidation in the G7. We have the lowest deficit in the G7 and the lowest debt to GDP ratio. Those are all key proof points, and those are why the Parliamentary Budget Officer concluded over the summer we are in a fiscally sustainable place, comfortably so, and for the long term. And, his crucial point is that our debt to GDP ratio is declining and steadily so. And I would point to the fact that, we talk a lot about the United States. They are at deficits of 6% and maybe higher. So Canada is in a very strong position when it comes to fiscal sustainability over the long term, and we're also in a very strong relative fiscal position.
Follow up.
The Parliamentary Budget Officer also, though, in the past, about a month ago, and more recently in an interview with us, has said that you did not he believes you have not hit the $40 billion deficit promise that you made as part of that fiscal anchor. He thinks you passed that by as much as $7 billion. And he's waiting for the public accounts to come out to confirm that, and they're normally out by now, and we haven't seen them yet. So can you respond to this? Did you blow past the $40 billion deficit figure last year? When will we see the public accounts on this?
As you know, Parliament is not functioning right now. There is a filibuster that has been going on for weeks and weeks. It is blocking routine parliamentary business. We're in a minority in Parliament. We do not control it. I'm glad to have the opportunity to say to the Conservatives, it is high time to stop these dilatory games and to let Parliament do its job. We do intend to publish a fall economic statement and the public accounts. There are challenges in doing our regular parliamentary work right now.
Okay, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this press conference today. Thank you, ministers. Thanks to the press gallery for coming. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.